Okie dokie, welcome to our Curve in Conversation series. Thank you so much for joining us. This week we are joined by the acclaimed choreographer Kane. Many of you will be familiar with Ellen's work through her astonishing work on West Side Story that you will have seen at Curve this Christmas. So hello and welcome to Ellen.
Hello, hi.
It's great to have you with us today. So do you want to take us sort of back to the beginning a little bit, how you sort of first came into contact with dance and theatre and how you sort of got interested in the theatre and choreography?
Yeah. Well, I had quite a strange, I guess, introduction. I grew up in Hackney. So there wasn't a huge amount of dance, if you like, available to me. We had a library across the road that on a Friday evening had a dance club that one of my good friends used to go to. And I sort of resisted for many years, I think, and then eventually I went just because I was bored, I think. And I went there with her and I ended up staying doing that, you know, once a week for a year or two. And then at my school, they offered an option of GCSE dance. You had to do dance, I think, or PE. And I hated PE. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to do the dance option. And actually, I sort of, I have a love for music. So I've always loved music. I can't play an instrument. I just love, I always loved to dance, you know, like. So we had an incredible teacher who was like amazingly passionate. And, you know, for this school in Hackney, state school in Hackney, she was just an inspiring person really to have. And she brought this company in, which was from Lewisham College. And it was a touring company. And we had performance from them. And I have no idea what, but something happened. And I was adamant that that's where I was going to go to college. And that wasn't until I was about, they came really when I was, I think, 15. So, yeah, so I then, or 6, it must be just before I left college. So then I auditioned for this college, Lewisham College, and started when I was 16, really. Yeah, so that was my introduction to dance, quite late. Yeah.
And were you training as a dancer then? You were presumably engaged in all the different sort of, what's the word, ballet and jazz and,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so what they offered there was an incredible opportunity for people who come to the art form late. So it was a course tailored for 16 and above. And you were also able to do A-levels in the evening. So my dad was a very staunch Irishman and was not a fan of me suddenly taking to being a dancer. So he was adamant that I had to do A-levels as well as follow this, what he thought would be quite a temporary sort of indulgence, I think. And so they trained you, you were able to do this foundation course for 2 years. And you were taught classical ballet, you were taught Graham technique, which is a form of contemporary dance, isolation technique, which is a jazz dance discipline, improvisation. I mean, yeah, they covered all the basics. And I have to say, looking back, again, I've got such huge admiration for those people. They were just so committed and so talented, actually, and so they excelled at teaching an older mind how to access the body in a way, really, which was, you know, meant for younger people, really, I think. Yeah.
And so do you believe that you can sort of dance or connect with a sort of physicality and non-everyday sort of movement language at any age? Do you think it could sort of be accessible and open to all of those?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I believe we can all dance. You know, I think when you say, well, I can't dance, I believe we can all dance. You know, dance is just an interpretation, it's an expression of how you feel about something, you know, how you respond to something, and there's no one to say that how one person responds to it is any better than how another does. And so therefore it's just, I guess it's just being brave enough to be free, really. Of course there are art forms, there are disciplines within it, like a classical, which is like an athlete, and undoubtedly it's much better that you start when you're a young child, because your physicality starts to set in a way which makes it almost impossible to access certain things. So yeah, I do believe that. I do. Yeah.
So there's hope for me yet.
Always. Always.
So what was your journey then from Lewisham College sort of into the theatre profession? What were your sort of first steps into a sort of professional life?
Well, I then auditioned, I had to audition for a proper college, you know, not a college, but what they call a higher level institution. So that basic training had given me the opportunity to at least audition for these, you know, I auditioned for Rombe, I auditioned for the Place, the London Contemporary Dance School, I auditioned for London Studio Centre, and I got into them all, and I luckily got a scholarship to London Studio Centre, which was the one I actually wanted to go to, because I felt like it did not narrow my mind. It didn't narrow the learning experience. It meant that I could keep finding out what I felt, really. So I was very lucky and very grateful, so I went there. And coming out the end of that, I met a woman called Sharon Ray, who was a dancer in London Contemporary Dance Theatre, and she had a company called Jazz Exchange, music and dance company. She was incredibly gifted, an amazing creative sort of spirit, really. And I danced there for lots of years when I was young, and I used to do the trade shows, and it was a very small company. And then I went on to I did a huge amount of teaching for the RAD all over the world, in Italy and Singapore, and I used to teach jazz, isolation technique, so I was trained in that. And then I started to dance. I'd always had, so even through Studio Centre, I sort of specialised in contemporary dance. And in my head, it was always something that I strongly, strongly wanted to pursue. And I had the opportunity to work with a couple of choreographers. I did a little workshop experience at Phoenix Dance, and then I worked with a company called Honorary Aguike and Kerry Nichols. And then an opportunity came to dance for Richard Alston. So I auditioned and I got that job, and I stayed there for 4 years. And then I left. And then I left on a whim, because I felt it wasn't right for me anymore. I knew that for lots of different reasons, my time, even though I loved it and I had incredible opportunities there, it was time to move on, and I didn't know where to or what to. And so I started teaching Cunningham technique at the Place, and just because that's where Richard's company was based. And then Lynn Page, who used to work with Peter Darling, I think came past my studio, or I bumped into her in some way, or she was watching a class I was teaching, and waited and said, look, I know someone who's looking for an associate, and would you be interested? And at that point, I think I was teaching 2 classes a week, and that was the only work I had. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, yeah, it's in musicals. And I was like, but I said, sure, you know, like I had a flat and I had bills to pay, and I was working in a pub part-time because I'd left the company. And so then I met Pete, really, and yeah.
And at what point did you start to think about this idea of a choreographer and the role of the choreographer? Was that part of those moments where you're starting to think of moving on from the company? I mean, when did the idea and sort of recognition of the choreographer's role start to come to the fore in your thinking?
I think, you know, looking back now, of course, you don't know what's happening at the time. You're just, I'm quite impulsive, and I just respond in terms of, if I really feel something, I feel it. And that's kind of, for good and bad, how I judge some of my decisions anyway. But I realised that I felt like the world was becoming too small where I was in the company, and as much as I loved it, I felt like I wasn't being stretched, and I had reached some sort of lid, and I felt like I needed to reach beyond that, and I didn't know what that meant or how to, because at that point I was 29 or 30. I wasn't thinking I want to be a choreographer. I was definitely thinking I want to experience other ways of using my body and creating work, and finding out how to create movement underneath a different voice. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know necessarily that it was about learning about my own voice. I knew it was a time to learn, I think. Yeah.
I think that's a common sort of theme and idea. I sort of recognise it in myself, and from doing these conversations, that whenever an artist or a creative mind sort of feels like they've reached the sort of zenith of the environment or the sphere that they're in, that the moment they feel or even can see a sort of whiff of complacency or something being settled or comfortable on the horizon, then it's time to smash through that and move on to the next place, even if you don't quite know what it is.
Yeah.
But I think that seems to be a sort of common trend, I guess, in all of our sort of creative minds.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. You don't like you say, you don't recognize it at the time, and you kind of go, "Oh my God, I must be crazy! Like, I'm about to be offered the best roles, and the sort of program for next year is incredible, and yet, no, can't do it. Got to go, even if I'm going to, earn £12 a week, or I don't know. Anyway, so yes, I agree.
Yeah, it's about moving forward, isn't it, and challenging yourself, and always sort of searching those new sort of artistic horizons, I guess.
Yeah.
And then, so you began this sort of period of collaborating with Peter Darling, who you've mentioned, and Matthew Warchus as the director, as part of that sort of trio, working on shows like Matilda, The Lord of the Rings, and Groundhog Day. So clearly a very fruitful and productive period of work between the three of you. What was it about that collaboration, specifically, I guess, with Peter Darling, that really ignited your sort of creative juices and fired your imagination?
Well, I met Peter, initially we worked on Billy, so we did Billy Elliot first, and I never met anyone, a choreographer, that didn't approach choreography from steps. Like that, I never approached it. Either it was the choreographer who would be dancing and you'd learn it and do it, or you, like Richard, would do it from the score and just be creating shapes based on the technique. But Pete obviously was an amazing actor and approached his work very much from that point of view. So it was a skill I had no knowledge of. So it was like starting all over again. And it just so happened, I think, that the skill set that he needed at the time, because when I met him, we were doing these workshops to create the material for the children in Billy Elliot, was my skill set, because you needed a mix of sort of classical ballet, which Richard's company was a neoclassical company, contemporary dance with a sort of sense of urban and jazz and ability. And so he taught me it was like going back to square one. It was a baptism of fire, is what I would say. It was frightening, because of course it's not like you're building on anything you knew. Musical business is totally different from the concert dance world. It's I didn't have any idea about any of it. And so, yeah, it was a huge learning curve for many years, actually. So that started like that. And then I guess meeting Matthew, the first show I met Matthew on was after Billy. We did Lord of the Rings. And yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just one of those things, isn't it? The work, I think, sort of speaks for itself. Like, it just seems to fit, or it seemed to fit. And sometimes that just happens, as we know. You can't predict it. There have been other shows where it just doesn't fit, and you don't know why. And it's not because you don't like the person. It just doesn't gel. And then other times you don't even have to try. It's just there, and it just works. And I guess that's sort of, I would say, that I guess is what's kept that connected triangle in a way. Yeah. I mean, I can't speak for Pete, but from my point of view, that's.
Yeah, I really recognise that, and I remember when we first met, it was the prospect of working together was based very much on that fit, and it feeling like we could collaborate and we could challenge each other, and we could sort of lock horns in a really creative and exciting and dynamic way, which would hopefully yield good work. And certainly as a director, I hadn't seen your work before. I was just inspired by our meeting and the meeting of our sort of minds and discussing what our production of West Side Story could be like.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You kind of go, oh, I'm really engaged by this person. Actually, that's it. And I know that if they're equally engaged, that all those great things that eventually turn into something that's on the stage have come from a seed of a conversation. And it's from that small seed and from the ingredients that we all build and add on that thing then blossoms. And if that isn't easy, then of course it's difficult it's like you're trying to speak another language, which is really hard. And so when it works, you go, oh, like, I'm so excited to talk about it, or you just, it's inspiring. It's inspiring, yeah, because it makes you think, actually, which I really like.
Yeah, I'm increasingly now sort of, rather than sort of fixating on people's CVs or what they've done before or seeing their work, I'm interested just to talk to them and get to know the person and see if there's a synergy and if there's a connection which can sort of trigger and, can sort of light a creative fire, I guess.
Well, I think like you're brave. You're a hugely brave director, I think, and you can feel that in your spirit, and I think that's it's a very brave way to approach finding a team, but more and more I think it's actually crucial.
Yeah, and especially when we're like working on a project like West Side Story, it's sort of, you've got to bring your brave game, haven't you? I mean, all of the imagination, the sense of courage, the sense of forging out this sort of new production. You have to sort of be brave and as bold as those writers and those kids who are depicted in that play are or were.
Yeah, I agree.
And what sort of fired your creative juices on West Side Story? What was the sort of starting point when you were approaching that movement language that I guess we all created together, but as a choreographer, you were the sort of central visionary sort of heartbeat of that. What sort of fired your juices on that?
I think there were many things, I think the thing that you and I spoke about, which was absolutely at the heart of it, is that it's not a story of old, it's a story of now. We know that. We know that it's happening in, not so much right now when we're less aware of it because of our current situation, but it was happening before our eyes. The story was just being repeated. And I think, I realised also looking back even at that, I was so taken by this story because at the heart of it, there were these kids that were just looking to be validated in the world, searching to be valued, searching to connect, searching to mean something to somebody, and to matter. And I think that, you know, the sort of person that I am, I'm very passionate, really, I guess, to fault sometimes. And I find the human spirit very inspiring. And so for me, instantly, of course, the sort of double-edged thing of going, oh my God, this is slightly terrifying. But I didn't, in a weird way, I wasn't afraid because I could feel it, and I knew I could feel it. And if I hadn't have had that, I would have probably, even when we met, as fun as that would have been, I think I would have said, I don't think I can do it because it's too intimidating and it's too scary. I could just feel it, and every time we talked, I felt it more. And so it was, yeah, I don't know. I felt like it was something that it grew very much from the human story inside it. Yeah.
And I know in pre-production, before we started even getting into auditions, you were doing workshops and bringing dancers together to try material and workshop ideas. Yeah. How important is that part of the process for you? Was that something specific to West Side Story, given the volume of dance, or is that something you'd like to do on every project?
What I like to do is I like to, if I can, so for West Side Story, I think it was crucial because we had so little time, you know, and even in the workshops, I only spent a day on each of those numbers. And if you think about the length of those numbers, to spend one day to workshop your ideas is like, that's nothing. So for me, I spent actually months at a desk working out this music and working out these ideas in my head and trying to put them into some sort of form to go with the music and the script and da-da-da. So all I was doing in those workshops really was trying to formalize those thoughts enough so I could then go away and go, yes, that will work. And make sure that when I walked into the room with our company, that the structure was solid. So even if stuff moved inside it, I knew that the actual A to B of what I was saying inside those sequences was absolutely sound. And I would say that yeah, it's huge. Those even 5 days of workshops for me is hugely important because it means I don't waste rehearsal time on it and I don't lead people down a track that I know I'm not going to use, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And once we were in rehearsals and once we're sort of all together in the studio in Leicester, what are your sort of memories? What was challenging about the process or working on West Side Story from a choreographic point of view? What are those sort of memories you have of the challenges we faced?
It's a good one. I mean, you know, interestingly and strangely, I struggled to find that answer a little bit more because I have such an amazing memory of making that show. Like I have such a fondness for that process, that period of time, for how amazingly smoothly it went, considering the juggernaut that it is. But I guess what I found the most was time, you know, like, and for the company trying to balance where I knew personally I wanted them to be and to do these sequences in the way they needed to be done. I had to push them incredibly hard and there wasn't a huge amount of time. So it was like going all the time at them. And also we had a youth company, so that was challenging because we could only use them a certain amount of time, and yet I wanted them to feel very integral to the piece, not just dressing. So I think if anything, that was the most challenging, the time and trying to make the youth company a really valid part of the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I will be, on behalf of the building and the theatre and the Curve Young Company, forever grateful for how much time you invested in them. And I remember, I think it was one day during previews, or maybe it was later on in the run, and you said you were going to come up and do a workshop and do some rehearsals with everybody. And you know, I was saying, well, maybe don't rehearse them that day because everybody's so tired now at the moment. We're in the run, it's been an intense rehearsal process. And you said, well, actually, by investing time in them when they're tired and coming up and rehearsing with them, that's the best thing you can do in terms of investing in people and showing them how much appreciated they are and how much love there is, you know, for them. And that really struck with me and stayed with me. And I think the work you did with the young people, especially, it was just sort of extraordinary because, as you say, they weren't dressing, they were an integral part. And as we know, on those moments where, you know, somebody didn't show up or they got stuck at college or whatever, we really felt it because they were all gold on that stage. You couldn't just take one person out and shuffle them around. It was all so perfectly sort of, you know, realised.
Yes, and we must feel, you know, hugely grateful to Emily and to Katie, who, you know, were there keeping them and, you know, inspiring them each time to keep going. So
I think that
a huge team effort.
Yeah, the job of the resident director and choreographer is just so important, especially in a long, intense run like that. And just sort of more generally, it was your first time working at Curve and in the theatre there in Leicester, and we obviously loved having you there. What did you take from it? What did you enjoy about the Curve experience?
I think I just felt incredibly supported. You know, and I think that comes from the top. It comes from you and Chris, and you know, we were incredibly brave. I think with what we did. I think we did a brave production of it, and there wasn't a day actually where I felt like there was no question. It was just like, how are we going to get this on? And that was felt from Tess. That was felt from everybody there, and. You know, even when we had the stumbling points, how do we tech these people into this show? And oh my God, they're at college and they can't be there. And, you know, it was like, let's get the solutions, find the solutions. Yeah, it's an incredibly creative building. It feels like a community hub, and it feels like a place where it's a yes place. And how can we make this happen? Which for me, it's just empowering, and it makes you want to do better. Yeah,
I always think like yes is so much easier than no, even if yes is yes to an enormous sort of challenge or complex thing. It's so much easier to say yes and then find a way to navigate through those challenges rather than saying no. It just seems so much easier, even though saying yes might present many more challenges and sort of hurdles to overcome. It's always the best way, isn't it?
Well, I think it comes through, I have to say. I think it very much feels like that. It feels like that you're never afraid. Actually, I think it helps you to grow because you're not afraid to suggest things. You're not afraid to push it, to challenge it, because actually you're never going to be really met with a brick wall. It's always going to be, well, if it's a yes, how is that really going to happen? And what is that? Let's talk about it. Is that realistic? Okay, it is. Let's do it. No, you know, yeah, I felt it was an empowering building to be in.
Good. That's incredible to hear. And obviously we're desperate to get you back to Curve and get you back in the building. But for now, you're working on the Matilda film, which sounds incredibly exciting. What can you tell us about that, and how's pre-production going?
It's good. Yes, it's, you know, trying to invent a story that I know, reinvent, I guess, a whole new world for a story that I know so well it's been challenging, but I think it's the same feeling I had, I think, on West Side, where I know what's at the heart of it, and I know that turning it into film is obviously quite different anyway to theatre, so it just was exciting. It was an exciting opportunity, and so we're kind of, you know, working away, scratching away at trying to sort of work out how these numbers might work, how we schedule the enormous amount of children involved. Yeah, trying to work out the numbers so that we can get the drawings done over Zoom, you know, like trying to pass information through over these Zoom calls that is now our new life. So it's going, and we set out, actually I think what's been brilliant about it, we've had about 1,500, I think, online, you know, submissions from children dancing in their, you know, sitting rooms and corridors and gardens, and actually some of those kids I think probably would never have come to audition. And so as much as that's a job of, you know, going through those submissions, and we've got amazing people who help obviously, and I've got amazing people who help me, so, but it's going actually. I think it's an exciting, I'm really excited by it, and I'm actually, I think it's an incredible story.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, so at the heart of it is another one of those incredible stories. And so it makes you want to work to tell that story.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And did Ralph Fiennes send you a video of him dancing?
He didn't, but I have seen Rafe dancing on the internet, so I sort of, I know how he moves, let's say.
Well, you said we're all dancers, so...
We are all dancers, that is so true, yes.
Yeah, and tell us, just sort of, before we finish up, what advice or what can you offer to sort of anybody who might be watching this thinking about they'd like to be a dancer or follow in your footsteps as a choreographer?
Well, you know, I think those two things are slightly different. I think as a dancer, you've just got to do the research. You've got to go, okay, where can I go? Where can I go to, if you haven't started, where do I go to start? Where do I, and then once you start, it's all about opening your sort of mind, isn't it? And putting the effort into finding out what you're interested in. And then once you've found out what you're interested in, going, how can I access that? How can I make that available to me? How can I do those things? As far as choreography, I think, you know, I would always say that assisting someone is for me, it's been the education of a lifetime. You know, like working with Peter has been one of the most valuable experiences in my sort of, you know, career, if you like. And I would never change it, and it's why I'm here today. So I sort of go, it's an invaluable tool. If you can do it, I would absolutely advise to take that opportunity and work with choreographers, learn how different people work, processes, etc. And then you build your own arsenal up, and you go, okay, and then you've made directors, you've made contacts, you've made networks. You just start expanding on it in a very healthy way as you build your skill set. Would be my approach. Well, yeah, it was my approach. So.
Other approaches are available. Just FYI. Yeah.
Yes, and as soon as COVID-19 opens up, they'll be for sale. So you know.
And we're thinking about, you know, what challenging times we're living through at the moment. When we come out at the other side of all of this, what role do you think theatres like Curve will have to play within their societies, and what do you think will the role of arts and artists be?
Well, I think the theatre, you know, in terms of Curve and all the regional and the main houses, really, you know, they're a place where community connect. So really, you know, for me anyway, and of course we're theatre lovers, but it's a hub and it's a home of stories, and it's a home and a way of connecting with people and prompting thought and engaging your mind to other things. And for me, I guess it's a way of holding up a mirror. So maybe stories will be written about this time. I'm sure people are writing as we speak about this sort of lockdown period. There'll be a play probably before we know it. And I just think it's crucial in terms of reconnecting, rebuilding our communities. making us think, provoking thought to move forward, all of those things. I think theatre is crucial in that way, really. And I think no matter who you are, really, it will be something that's an important part of the regeneration of getting back to some new normal. Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect place to leave it. Thank you so much, Ellen, for talking to us today.
Pleasure.